mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jenn Dorrell.
Well, greetings, all my fellow weirdos out there listening and watching tonight. This is the very first Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network,
Yes.
and we are so delighted to be here. I'm one of your hosts, Dean Bertram, and joining me is the always delightful Jenn Dorrell. How are you doing tonight, baby?
Yes, I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm good. As some listeners and viewers of this channel might know, I also dropped another show earlier this week with Jason McLean, Mysterious Library, also on the Untold Radio Network. So I'd encourage anybody who didn't get to see that to go back into the Untold Radio playlist on either YouTube or Facebook and check it out. And of course, all these shows will shortly also be dropping on the Untold Radio Network's podcast platform, so you'll be able to watch and view them almost anywhere, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
I thought, though, before we bring on our fantastic guests, we should probably think about saying hello to some of the good folks in chat, because I'm sure there's going to be some people here we've never talked to before, and there's probably going to be some people who've jumped over from our old Talking Weird channel.
Let's see. We've got Ken.
Hey, Ken. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here.
Let's see. Hey, Bigfoot Society.
That's awesome. Thank you, Bigfoot Society. You're going to enjoy tonight's show. It's very squatchy. We've got Long Island Bigfoot as well. Before said, looking forward. Oh, no, it's Mothman 46. I'm ready to talk some untold weirdness. B. Lynn earlier said, we'll be watching. Sounds quite interesting. Thank you for joining us, B. And Long Island Bigfoot said, looking forward to it as always, fellas. Well, people are probably going to still get a little while to get used to it, that it isn't Doug and Alex tonight. They still do their show during the week. This is one of the many new shows dropping on Untold Radio Network over the next week or two. And again, we're delighted to be here. I'm seeing, is there anybody else? Oh, Horace Smith, who's a regular viewer and listener, both now of Mysterious Library and Untold Radio, Professor Emeritus of Astronomy and Physics from Michigan State University. So thank you for joining us, Horace. And we also have Dwayne Zazeski saying yes.
And Joe Fox.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Joe's a long-time listener of Talking Weird. And ATM Asheen. Hi, folks. Hi. Thank you so much for being here with us. It's so great to have you. I think, though, without any further ado, I mean, we could probably chat about you and I until the cows come home, but maybe we'll do that another night. Tonight, let's get straight into our guest, because I'm sure that's what all the Untold Radio listeners and family are wanting to hear. So he's a family man, speaking of family, in the state of Wisconsin, the state that I also reside in. So it's wonderful to have another Wisconsinite with us tonight. He's a graphic designer, a cinematographer, and film editor. He founded the Wisconsin Paranormal Investigators in 2007 to investigate and research UFOs and ghosts. But since 2014, he's been on a solo quest searching for the Wisconsin Sasquatch in southeast Wisconsin. In 2019, he had produced, filmed, edited, and directed his documentary, Finding Jay, which is wonderful. I recommend people check that out on Amazon Prime. I'm sure it's on other platforms as well, but Amazon is where I watched it. It actually says here in front of me, streaming on Amazon Prime and Vimeo, and it's also available on Blu-ray. So there you go. And in 2022, he released a sequel to his first documentary, Beyond the Kettle, Finding Jay 2, which is also available on Blu-ray and streaming on Vimeo at the moment only. I actually watched it last night. It's fantastic, and I would recommend everybody who hasn't yet seen it to go and check it out. At any rate, without any further ado, let's welcome to the very first Talking Weird on Untold Radio Network, Jay Bachochin.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Hey, Jay.
Greetings. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me on. What a great intro. I love that. It was almost like I wrote that bio.
Well, I mean, that's the insider trick. Often the bios are somewhat written, but I always fiddle with them, add my own little flair.
It sounded great.
Oh, well, thank you. Gee, I dug the latest Finding J2 last night. What a fantastic film.
Yes, it's very good.
Thank you. I mean, I can't, like I said, is when you put stuff out like this, there's a lot of close friends that know you're doing it, even a lot of them that have actually gone out with me researching that ended up in the documentary. And of course, when they see it, I don't know if I get that true biased opinion, you know what I'm saying? Because they know I did that. So it's great to hear meeting you guys for the first time and viewing my second documentary, and that you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And there really are a lot of different guests on there as well, which is fantastic. I mean, other than obviously yourself, the first one had Linda Godfrey, which was amazing to see. But in this episode, and we'll get to this in a minute, but there's Ron Moorhead, there's Ken Gerhard, there's some of these people we've had on Talking Weird before. There's Adam Benedict. There's a bunch of different guests. And there's Tobias Wayland, there's Tobias's wife. There's all kinds of people in the field.
Yeah, we got Steve Coles in there and David Weatherly, which I actually called the Four Horsemen, really, because these are the guys that really haven't gone out with me, and I needed I needed their insight as well, because at some point when you're out there, you're thinking you're looking for maybe a flesh and blood primate that we haven't caught up with, but some of these things are so strange, and I'd like to see if there's a connection with some of these odd lights out there, as well as the Bigfoot behavior I've encountered.
Yeah, there was mention in your documentary too about there being 4 different categories. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that's actually perfect, because Steve Coles, the Sasquatch detective out in New York, beautifully put them in 4 camps. I always thought there was 3, but he added the 4th one, which I was like, oh yeah, I guess it was. Number 1 is what the paranormal side would call people that look for Bigfoot apers, and the apers would be the ones that are looking for Bigfoot. They believe Bigfoot's out there. They've had encounters or found evidence. They believe that they are looking for something that's just a flesh and blood primate like us, or like any other mammal or gorilla. So those are the ones that are called the apers, and they kind of stick strictly to the science based. And the second camp would be the paranormal Bigfoot, and these are the people that believe Bigfoot's out there, is flesh and blood, but it can cloak, it can walk through portals. It can do all these strange type of attributes that seem more paranormal or supernatural. So that kind of goes against the apers, obviously, which is weird because we're all in this Bigfoot camp, but then there's these broken up camps. And then the third is a lot of people believe that Bigfoot's ET, extraterrestrial, maybe dropped off here, and they're just kind of like drones of the woods keeping an eye on us. And then the 4th would be the biblical, which would be the Nephilim, which I needed to get more into that, which is in the book of Enoch, where it really talks about the Nephilim. So it's really interesting because I wanted to put these 4 perspectives in my film. Again, it is, it's basically what I'm doing out there researching, but from what I'm encountering, and it kind of gets into this, so cut me off if you have another question here, but the one that I always say is that there's approximately 8 billion people in the world, and everybody has their own truth. It's what the reality is, and that's how I feel in this little nook of corner of Wisconsin, from what I'm experiencing. So an aper can talk to me till I'm blue in the face, saying it's just a primate, but I'm like, maybe nobody really knows. I mean, I don't even know, but what I've experienced tells me something different, would tell me maybe it's not so much paranormal, but maybe supernatural. Anyway, that's basically my truth. And what I usually tell people, because, Jay seems to have all these answers. No, I'm just a good talker. I don't have all the answers. If you really want to get those answers, go out and discover for yourself. That's really the bottom line.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things I really enjoyed about the documentary is it does put forward those different perspectives, and you're very open to different researchers' input into what is or isn't Bigfoot or what Bigfoot might or might not be. Now, I know too, you're always very open and very upfront about the fact that you're a Christian, which is wonderful. But can you say how that impacts perhaps your approach to Sasquatch, or if it impacts your approach, or if you bring that kind of biblical worldview to your examination of Bigfoot?
Yeah. It's basically, unless you're in my shoes and you know who I am and what I feel and what my truth is, yes, I 100% believe in God and creation and that Jesus died for my sins. You know what? I believe that because this is what the Bible or the scripture would tell me. And I never say I would nitpick through the Bible saying, well, they're over exaggerating here, or this applies to me. This doesn't apply to me. It's either all or nothing. And that's a leap of faith. And honestly, that's what I do when in everyday life, not just Bigfoot, but anything. So is it possible that my faith from what I believe of what God could create, good or bad, it's not everything's just all butterflies and happiness. I mean, I think there's got to be a balance out there. And with that being said, I look back at the scriptures saying it is written, man has lived to be 1,000 years old. I think Noah was close to 1,000 years old. His son was 800, somewhere around there. But, so you could say, no, well, that's just old men. And it was, misconstrued and or rewritten, or just the way we would read it today. But I don't do that. I look at that as saying, you know what, that's my truth. And if that's my truth, then I start to look at, what if these beings, which I actually don't look at as animals, I look at them as people out there. I give them respect as people when I go out and research. A lot of people will bang on trees and howl. I don't knock that. I just don't do that because I have a different respect when I go into nature's home. And basically that's when it really comes down to it. That's my truth. And that's the Bible, my Bible foundation of being able to say there's more to just the flesh and blood primate of this. There's something supernatural to them. I mean, people would say Jesus did miracles and that was supernatural, not paranormal, but a supernatural ability. And I believe that's what these beings are, is a supernatural attributes that they have.
When you go out there in the woods, you go very open, which is something different to some Bigfoot investigators. And by that, I mean, you don't carry a firearm, which, to be honest, I'd be worried not so much about Bigfoot, but encountering like a cougar or a bear or something out there. But you also say you make this point of putting up your hands when you start and kind of showing that you're not a threat to them. Could you tell us a little bit about that approach?
Absolutely. And believe me, it's not that I don't recommend anybody that doesn't carry a firearm or anything like that, because you have to know where you're researching. If you all of a sudden transported me over to, Pacific, Northwest, and you wanted to put me out there, I'd be a little bit more about carrying a firearm, a sidearm. But in my case, I do go out there and protect myself. I do have bear spray. I've got my survival knife. I've, kind of like Rambo, it's all for the close encounters. I carry a 2500 lumens torch. So at night, you could blind the predator, give you the advantage. So safety is number one for me, no matter what. So it's not a matter of me, trying to be, I don't want to say Indiana Jones or, Crocodile Dundee, going out there without a weapon and going, everything's going to be okay. Yes, you still have to be safe. Now, when I go out there, when I first started doing this, I went out there with a bunch of equipment on one piece of apparatus. I was like my own walking studio, big producing studio, with the bright lights, and I had my phone on there, I had my thermal on there. And I think it kind of dawned on me one night that we were out there and we thought we saw a flashlight coming towards us. And no, it wasn't Bigfoot with a flashlight. It was a person with a flashlight kind of approaching us. And what's the first thing that you would do? Most people say they'd turn and go the other way, or they would hide. And I say, okay, why would you hide? Because you don't know their intentions. You don't know the intentions behind that person with a flashlight, even human to human. So that made me start to think, well, I'm walking around with this big apparatus trying to look for Bigfoot. I mean, if I'd never find Bigfoot then, right? Because he's going to be like, I don't know this guy. I don't know what they're doing with these bright lights. So I started a whole new, I'll keep some of the equipment in my pack or whatnot, but I'll go out there hands free. So even though I have a body cam and an audio on, I go out there hands free. And it started as a joke with the hands, by the way. I'd walk out there and I'd put my hands out and I'd be like, see, nothing in my hands. I would say this to the woods. I would actually hear the raccoon and possum laugh when I do this. And I'd be like, see, nothing in my hands, right? And I'd actually lift them higher than me like that. But it was a way of kind of a submission, I believe, that I'm coming in, showing respect, saying, look, I don't have any firearms on me. I don't have, big lights that I'm going to blind you with. I come in peace type of thing. And like I said, that started as a joke, but I started doing that ever since like 2015 and haven't stopped. In fact, the people I go out with, if we start to walk in, she goes, Jay, you didn't do your thing yet. Like, oh yeah, and I turn around like, I'm here. I kind of announce myself. But, as far as the firearm, the sidearm is, I believe that they have a certain ability to kind of sense who we are, right? I mean, animals do that. Dogs do that, right? Dogs know when you're scared. So why couldn't these people, these beings that have just adapted to the woods, adapted to a more wild side, to be able to hone in on this guy that I'm watching, and I'm speaking Bigfoot ways, and he's watching me go by going, he's walking too confidently out here. And that confidence is actually based on something that person's holding that could kill you. And I believe they could sense your confidence. Therefore, they just kind of steer clear from you because they know you have a boomstick or whatever you want to call it, something that's going to hurt them or kill them. And since my quest really isn't about to try to capture the best video, the best audio, and to get famous by, I mean, you know what? Everybody already has their minds made up, whether they believe Bigfoot exists or not. Now, this is me. This is a personal quest for me, and I want to get closer. I do want to make that contact. I think it would be one of the coolest things to actually see say a Bigfoot 20 yards from me lift up his hands and mimic me. And that would be a sign of I just made a contact. A lot of people say, Jay, you're crazy. You're gonna get yourself killed doing this. But I don't believe that. So basically that's the reason why I won't carry a firearm. But at the same time, in the same breath, I can't say that if you're in Pennsylvania or, like I said, in Washington State or anything like this, that's a whole different animal out there, of something to be able to attack you. Here in Southeast Wisconsin, we might have a occasional black bear go by, but he's gone before you even see him. There's been a few cougars down here, again, not overrun, but just kind of learn the behavior of them, stick in a group, and the rest is just watching each other's backs and just playing it safe and enjoying nature.
Have you ever ran into any type of wild animal while you're out there?
Honestly, besides the turkey vultures or the turkeys that sit in the trees, they kind of rest in the trees. You can kind of walk right underneath them, And when they take off, they break every branch above you and it scares you. Besides muskrat, and of course we'll run into the occasional deer or the buck, especially if it's near rut when you're out there before hunting season. They don't budge and they huff and puff almost like they want to get close to you and charge you sometimes. But other than that, nothing, we'll always hear coyotes out there. They sound close. Maybe they are. I don't know. I'm not too nervous about coyotes for some reason. It's kind of cool to hear them. But besides that, really no danger, that we've come across.
Tell us a little bit more about the Kettle Moraine. I'm more aware of the driftless area, which is a little closer to me. And I find it fascinating that on either side, on the west there's the driftless area, on the east you have the Kettle Moraine, and that both of them have unique geographies because of the way the ice moved through them or didn't move through them in the last ice age. And you also have both locations having this range of weird anomalous phenomena. But fill me in a little bit more on the Kettle Moraine, not just regarding Bigfoot, but regarding some of the other strange stuff that's down there.
Yeah. Well, the Kettle Moraine, it's 55,000 square acres. It actually runs about 100 miles through the state of Wisconsin. So really, if you look on a map and, if you Google Earthed it, and actually this is my wife, or we'll Google Earth it, and she's like, and you think Bigfoot lives in there? By the way, my wife supports me, but I don't know where she's at really with it, which is okay. I don't mind, because maybe, once I make this contact, I can maybe have proof and say, look, sweetie, your husband's not that crazy after all. But the Kettle Moraine is, that's where the glaciers kind of came in, kind of like you were saying, kind of dug up some areas. So you've got like these little these dome valleys. Some go down 200 feet, some go down 300 feet, and it's just kind of shaped, kind of like a kettle. And then you've got a lot of open area within the woods that's more the moraine. So that's where you get the Kettle Moraine. Perfect hiding place because, I would say for a Bigfoot or a family of Bigfoot feet. I haven't really decided on which one on that one yet, but foots. But with that, it's just loaded with like little lakes, ponds, some little streams. You got so much wildlife in there. Everything is just kind of like the opening to my second documentary. That's where I really wanted a place that it's a very tranquil area. And so, it dates back, but as far as the strange and weird stuff that you hear, you would think that there would be a hotline or a BFRO, site that would just have loads of these in the Kettle Moraine, but you don't. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means, people do live out there, and I bet you, and I'd love to go knock on every door that's out there and just say, hi, my name's Jay. Have you ever had any Bigfoot experiences out here or anything weird? I bet you I would get people to talk. But other than that, there's not a lot besides, we're really close to, you've heard of Bray Road in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Yes. Okay. So that's literally 13-minute drive from my house. So it's perfect. You can't get off on the road to investigate. It's all private farmland. And these are, third, fourth generation farmers. So they all know each other. So if you park on the side of the road and you're out there, another farmer is going to call that farmer. And next thing you know, you'll have the sheriffs out there because it's privately owned. So I suggest if you ever go on, it's a public road, just drive it and, obey the highway laws or whatnot out there. But that's where I actually kind of started. And a lot of people think that, this dog man doesn't just exist on Bray Road, but the surrounding areas. So if you want to go on a bigger, surrounding area, you're getting up to the Kettle Moraine, which I have heard a few very large black type wolves that people say, hey, I've lived up here for years. I know what a dog breed looks like. I know what coyotes look like. And I even know what a wolf would look like, but I've never seen anything this big on all fours, jet black, and just something that seemed normal. So there might be, tons and tons of stories. I do get stories off my website from different parts of Wisconsin, but what I'm saying is it's all kind of connected. If you really want to look at the Kettle Moraine, the way it goes through the state, then the Great North Woods, then you got Eagle River, and then you go up to Michigan. It's a perfect corridor that I think is a perfect way to move about the state.
Yeah, Joe Fox asked, isn't a moraine where the ice retreated? I think that's correct. Is that right?
Yeah, yes. And, not, I guess when you're kind of looking at it, and I've always tried to look up the simulations actually on YouTube. You can actually go to the Kettle Moraine headquarters, and they have a real cool museum there of all the different animals that are actually mounted, even the wolves, coyotes. And then they also have this really nice presentation in kind of a theater type room, and you get to learn a lot on it. But it's one of those that I wish I could make, to actually see how it retreats, how it made it, how everything, from the Ice Age and how the Great Lakes were formed and how, the Kettle Moraine was formed. I visually can see exactly how it would be. Don't quote me on everything. I'm not a scientist.
I'm going to let Jenn ask a question when we come back, but why don't we play the trailer for Beyond the Kettle for folks out there? I can fire that up. I'm ready to go.
I've got it.
Okay. And then then you can ask Jay a question when we
Wisconsin's Kettle Moraine is considered one of nature's most beautiful landscapes. But beyond this beauty lies many mysteries. My journey continues as I seek more answers.
I think it's highly probable that Bigfoot or Sasquatch, if it exists, can be found in the state of Wisconsin.
And during our hikes, we've been encountering strange balls of light and other light anomalies. Is there a connection between Bigfoot and these lights?
Many people want to simply look at the creature as an undiscovered ape, and that may well be the case. However, there's no denying that there are situations, encounters that have been reported where people experience seeing one of these creatures, but also other strange phenomena at the same time.
Either on the top of the trees or right through the trees, but it seemed like it glowed.
I don't know.
You get into quantum physics, you find that everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. You can find the vibration of something, the frequency of it, you can manipulate it, because it works that way in quantum physics.
I don't give it any kind of supernatural or demonic type of being, because why not? Because they have been very passive and act very much like primates in their home range when they stumble upon, or when we stumble upon them in the forests.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that?
Yes.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Thanks.
So when I was watching the documentary, I found it very interesting when you started talking about the lights, Bigfoot, and how they kind of show up together. So I've always kind of wondered myself about what if there's just some type of time warp in between where they've talked about the different categories, where the apes is actually us, in past time. And as with the lights, sometimes they'll think of aliens, and that the aliens are actually us and as our future selves. So is that something you've ever thought about?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Land of the Lost. I'll date myself, but back in the 70s. But,
So
yeah, but it's kind of, I do think of things that, is it possible that that there is exactly what you were saying, that could be the portals going either forward or back, or, are we all living on different planes, but right next to each other where it's just easy to step by? And I know how crazy that is because nobody really knows, right? So I always say I fancy the ideas of what that could be. And exactly what you were saying is that, are these, are they from the future? Are those the future people, or are they the past people? Because we always think that we evolved from caveman, that, all of a sudden we became who we are, which is always a little bit interesting on how that exactly happened. And I guess it's all a little bit different on what people's takes are. And I guess that's the hard part of discussing things like this, because I think, yes, you and we could sit here and talk about this all night, but you get other people that are saying, we're true apers. You guys are off your rocker, again, we're all in one camp, but if we have different opinions on it, then that's where the feuding and everything happens. But I'm open to listen to everything. If it turns out to be a flesh and blood primate we haven't caught up with, that's great. Again, what I do is I hunt the truth. That's it. I'd like to know what it is. If I can debunk something, great. If we finally find it and saying that's all it was, Jay, it was not, these Bigfoot people do not turn into balls of light and float around. Oh, okay. You're right. It's, this is what it is. So, but I definitely do agree with you that it's very possible that's what it could be.
Yeah.
One of the things that the documentary, which is great about it, is similar to what you were just saying then. And I think the best example of keeping an open mind in that documentary is when you take a witness called Devon towards the end of Finding J2. We won't spoil it, but you take him out to where he's had his Sasquatch experience. And you then go back and talk to most of the type of researchers who've been in the documentary about what they think about his experience. And you don't pass any judgment on who's right or who's wrong, but you let them all say, well, we think this is sincere. He's had a genuine experience. Or somebody else might say, well, who knows what he actually experienced, but he seems to be truthful. And somebody else might say, well, his body language told me that he wasn't being truthful. But you put it all there just for the audience to take these different opinions in and then, I guess, form their own conclusion. But that's pretty rare in this type of documentary.
Yeah. And I think the point I was trying to get across is what I was saying earlier, is everybody has their own truth, no matter what. We're all individuals. And, whether we all believe the same thing because we all watch the same thing and you have that commonality between the two. But, I'm not like that. And it doesn't stop at Bigfoot or anything weird. It could be in our everyday world of, the things that we're told or the things to believe. It's kind of like you have to do your own research. You got to hunt the truth on everything. And that's where I was trying to get to at the end of the film, was trying to get to that point of saying, look, you could watch this, you can believe it, you can think it's all hooey, whatever. That's fine. My truth is this, and I'm going to tell you what my truth is. If you care not to believe what my truth is, that's fine. Go out and find your own truth, and that's fine. And I'm good with that. That's how come I don't butt heads with anybody, is because I am that open of saying, that's your truth. Let me listen to it. Maybe that's what it is, and we could all sit there, we could all better learn from each other if we were more civil and we weren't all trying to stand on a pedestal, everybody shouting at each other. You know, I'll listen to anybody.
We do have a question from Horn Smith. Have you been able to have two separate cameras recording the light simultaneously as soon? See, I'm sorry, my eyes aren't as good. Determine distance and speed.
I've never had the two going. In fact, as you'll see in my documentary, the first light that came by us, I was facing this way. My head was facing to my right. So therefore, my body cam, which is looking this way, did not catch it. But, you know, of course, I saw it. But the ones that I have, or the few that I have caught, has always been just one camera. And it's hard to be able to judge the exact distance, the exact size, the exact speed. And boy, would I love to be out there to know where it's at. You know, it's like anything that you're doing. If any deer hunters, I used to deer hunt in a past life here. But when I did, you could be out there all day. You could be out there for 9-10 hours. Yeah. And then finally you're getting ready to get down. Well, there's your deer. And it just happens unexpectedly. So that's how these lights are. I go out there and I don't really just sit there and look in the trees or whatever for them. They just happen to be there at that particular time. And if they're not recorded, then there's really no way to 100% determine, you know, size, speed, distance, and all that.
Well, you're from Wisconsin. Everybody here has hunted in some life or another, Jay. So it doesn't surprise me that you've deer hunted. Venison, I think, is the state meat. I'm pretty sure. There's an experience in your documentary which I found fascinating because I had something very similar happen to myself. I don't often on Talking Weird talk about my own experiences. A, because I haven't had many, and two, because it's not a show about me. It's a show about the guests. But Adam Benedict, who's an author, we've had him on the show before, great guy. When he was out investigating with you in the Kettle Moraine, and you were doing what's called a leapfrog technique, which maybe you can explain a little bit more about in a minute. Anyway, he's left alone and he hears something coming towards him in the woods, and it gets very close and there's nothing there. Now, something like that happened to me in what I would never consider Bigfoot territory. I never considered it to be a Bigfoot. When I was in my, I guess, mid to late teens, I was camping with my family in a rural area of northern New South Wales, the state that I grew up in, northern central. So it wasn't right on the coast. And I went away from the fire one night by myself, and it was a moonlit night, very bright and light. Like you could probably almost have read a book by it. And something walked towards me in what was essentially an open grass plain. I could hear it as plain as day, no pun intended. And then I could actually even see the imprints of the foot come right up towards me. And I stepped back, you know, in a degree of fear. And then there was no wind, just to contextualize this. The whole grass all around me started moving. And then I just ran back to the fire and told my best friend who was there. I didn't tell anybody else. But hearing Adam's experience, it makes me wonder if what he experienced, and perhaps what a lot of people are experiencing who are experiencing Bigfoot, it might not be something paranormal or something in some way not a physical being in any manner whatsoever. There might be some universal experience of invisible type entities or forces that sometimes mess around with us. Did you come to any kind of conclusion like that after Adam came and told you his experience? Or what was your take on it anyway?
Well, you know, my take was I 100% believed him, but I'm always like, cool, why wasn't that me? That's, you know, but, you know, at the same time, that happened to, that second right after Adam's encounter in the film, you'll see that happened to my daughter as well. And the two things that I noticed that were together is they had no recording devices on them, no body cam, no audio device. So it's almost like let's pick on the ones that can't record us. Okay. So with that being said, you know, it was still, you know, I know the film was a little bit dark. That's just how the phone shot and whatnot. But when he did that, it wasn't totally dark yet. So it's kind of twilight. But when you're in the kettle with a canopy of trees, it seems a lot darker than what it is, but he was still able to see. And, the whole thing about when people talk about, Bigfoot being able to cloak or turn invisible, the one thing that I think I took is that the Bigfoot people evolved in their environment without technology, any technology. They're just using what I believe that what we have, but we can't utilize because we're kind of stymied by technology doing it for us. So we're just kind of blocked. And, I'm going to use a Star Wars reference here, but, I always think of like the Bigfoot people, that they can actually use what, not just telepathy, but, kind of a Jedi mind trick. This is not the Squatch you're looking for, and just make us not be able to see them. Because you've heard of infrasound, where I've actually, people use the term zapped. I've gotten zapped by infrasound. Well, you really don't know, but there has been a few times, not just me, but a few people I've gone out with are perfectly fine, and then all of a sudden want to throw up and heave just out of the blue. Just, you don't know what it is. It's just there. And, it might last only, 10 seconds or 30 seconds. And then after that, you're perfectly fine again. You don't know where that came from, which a lot of people would say that could be an infrasound that, just going right through us. And that got me to think about the whole, Jedi mind trick, the whole, you don't see us. You're going to walk right by us. We're going to stand and watch you, and you're not going to see us. Because how is it something so big, so heavy can move and, creep through the forest? Again, it doesn't make sense unless they're levitating or they have wings, or not even wings, but just levitating. So there's a lot of weird supernatural attributes that I say they have. And one of them, with, like I said, with Adam, is, hey, you know what? I'm going to just walk up to you, look at you, but you don't see me. And I think that's when Adam was just like, yeah, no, I don't want any of this, because it's right there, but I don't see you. And that's got to be a creep factor. A lot of people would say, well, maybe it's a ghost. I mean, ghosts can kind of give you that presence too. However, ghost, I guess if it approached you, you wouldn't hear it walking. And Adam said it, and if you know Adam, right? Adam's a great guy, and he's tells it on the line. He doesn't go with believing or non-believing. He's trying to understand what happened to him there. So yeah, that's kind of what I believe, what they can do to be able to, creep up to us.
When you talk about them creeping up to us or being invisible or messing with us or whatever they do, it brings to mind the fairies. And we joke about the fairies today, but the old fairy faith was far more complicated than just Disneyland type creatures. And the actual word fairy originally comes from their power to enchant us or to use their glamour to trick us. So the very word of fairy means that they can do all these kind of things, become invisible, delude our senses. And that makes me think, when we're talking about Bigfoot, of Joshua Cutchin and Timothy Renner's books, Where the Footprints End, where they make comparisons to what Bigfoot do with other paranormal entities, including the fair folk. And I often wonder, and I have a feeling you were almost getting to that stage in this doco as well. In fact, you even say something very similar in Beyond the Kettle. Maybe all of these things, Bigfoot, UFOs, fairies, whatever else, are they all manifestations of some root phenomenon? So all of these different phenomena that a lot of people don't put together, perhaps it's all the same, or perhaps it all comes from the same thing.
It is. It's that way. Maybe finding J3 will be the wee folk. You wouldn't believe on how many. Sorry, I got to clear my throat here a second. I was getting all choked up talking about the wee folk here.
They'll do that. We've had episodes where we've talked about the she or the fair folk or the other crowd, and the tech problems have gone through the roof. So just probably, who knows?
I mean, I've actually had a lot of reports of little people, and when we're saying little people, we're talking 12 inches or smaller. Yeah, that's Chris. He's one of my hiking partners out there in the Kettle, Chris Tipton. How you doing, Chris? Can give a shout out to you. And there has been tales of that. So now you're talking about Bigfoot, Dogman, lights, and little people. And, that's what I'm saying is it's kind of like you kind of have the whole gambit there, of the high strangeness that's going on there. So, is this all connected in one way or another? That's how come I'll always say I don't put Bigfoot in its own separate box and ghosts in their box and aliens in their box. What if they are all one and the same? What if they're all time travelers? It sounds crazy, but I think that's where I kind of keep my open mind about these things. So who knows? Actually, Adam and I, it's funny here, Dean, and I didn't put this in the documentary, which maybe it will be into the next one, but we did find little prints.
Get
like
out.
Little tiny, yes, in the snow. It was January 2020, I believe, and we went out for a day hike in the snow, climbed over a couple kettles. It was like this whole adventure thing. That's where actually I got zapped and almost threw up. But we found like what looked like these tiny little prints that were actually almost walking in a tightrope gait, several of them, and just on the top of the snow. So they weren't that heavy. They were only like maybe 2 inches, but they looked like little feet. It was crazy. So I did document that. But again, where do you put this? Again, if you saw my first film, where do you put the lights? Now you got my second film, and I've got the lights, and I'm talking about Bigfoot. Now, where do you put little people? It's tough.
One of the things I really admire about you is how you approach all of this with a very open mind. But I know you're also out there trying to get to the bottom of whatever the mystery is. But to be honest with you, and I'm not saying this in any dismissive sense at all, I often wonder if whatever this stuff is, if it's so ineffable, if it's so unknowable, that we can't get to know what it is. If maybe its entire purpose is almost just to deliver some type of numinous or mythical or mystic experience to our day-to-day lives, and we're no more going to find the solution than somebody in a fairy tale who goes into fairyland and comes back with gold in their pockets and then pulls the gold out and it turns into dust in their hands. So I don't want to dampen your investigations, but are you ever out there and just going, I'm never going to get to the bottom of this stuff?
Absolutely. Honestly, every time. I never go out there with tonight's the night. This is what I'm going to do. You know what? It's the journey. It's getting together with your friends and getting ready to go out and hike into nature, to go out to laugh. I mean, of course you're observing. It's not, I always say I'm not out here hunting wabbit, right? I'm not out there hunting. I'm out there having a good time with my friends and observing the night woods. And there are a lot of things that maybe popped up now that haven't in the past 8 years. But I find out what I just heard, yesterday is something that's been common. I was just not out there at that exact time. So it's learning new things about nature as well. Finding little glowworms in, late fall or, in November, where you're just like, these aren't lightning bugs. Why are we finding a lightning grub? But, apparently they're natural. Oh, and just like the frogs, like in spring, do you remember when you go out and you hear the ponds and you hear the frogs all go crazy and then they just stop? Right? You hear that? Well, when you hear that out in the kettle, oh, there's a big predator. All the frogs stopped. But what I realized, and this was several years ago, is that all the females are singing all the different species all at once. Then they all stop, and all the males use their little sonar, however, to find the females to mate. So, so it's kind of cool, when you hear stories that all the frogs stopped. There's a big predator around, like all the crickets stopped. Yeah. But there are answers to that, which is great. Again, that's why I go out there, hunt the truth. It doesn't mean that I'm going to find Bigfoot and he's going to raise his hands at me and sit down and say, "Hi, my name's Dorrell. Let's have a drink together. Let's have some coffee." It's not like that. So I go out just on this journey. I don't know where this destination will lead me, but I enjoy doing it.
I think it's wonderful that you go out there into the wilderness with your children as well, that you not just from the Bigfoot angle, but that they become interested in Bigfoot and as a result probably interested in other natural things, and they escape that kind of locked in cubicle TV video game reality that so many kids today are just locked into. And I think that's one of the potentials of this type of research and investigation and, interest is that it does make you want to go out there. It makes you want to find out things in nature, whether it's like you said, frogs and how their calls are actually operating, what the purpose of them is, or whether it's to try to find Bigfoot. And maybe you do both at once. And if your children are involved and if they're getting to know wilderness, I mean, that's obviously something that's occurred to you, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's just like the whippoorwills or the barred owls. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you? And I could use this. And again, I didn't grow up being an Outback Jack, deer hunting, Crocodile Dundee guy out there, but I'm still learning as I go, and I'm able to pass that on to my kids. And like you were saying, my kids, they'd be happy just to be online playing their games. But when I get them out there, they really enjoy it. And it's also creating memories out of anything. I didn't find Bigfoot. I didn't find anything cryptid, but you know what? I made memories with my kids. And really that's, number one to me.
I heard one of my favorite announcers in this space, Richard Sirrett, who's one of the guest hosts on Coast to Coast or The Weekend, and he's, I think, one of the truly great radio hosts of our era, actually. And he once said that he was a father and he did things with his boys because he was in the memory making business.
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
It's I guess that's what it all is. I'm the kind of guy that walks around with my iPhone, and I take pictures and videos of everything, no matter what it is. It's my wife might have like 3 pictures on her phone since Christmas, and I've got 800 I got to download because I just go crazy. I like to create and capture memories, and I may not even look at these zillions of pictures left, but maybe it's a legacy, just like everything that I record from my body cam to my audio. Everything is stored on 5 terabyte drives. I just keep everything. And that's what it would be. Because I always say my investigations today is going to be for the investigators tomorrow. And if that's my son or my daughter, great, And my oldest daughter, she's been really into that, as well. And has had a few experiences now to where she's like, Dad, let's go out this weekend. I'm like, great. What time? She goes, I love the morning, so I'll be over at 4 a.m. Like, oh. But you know what? It's the best time to get up. Sometimes you got to get out there early morning, afternoon, or stay late in the evenings just to do that. But I'm hoping that these memories will last a lifetime, for them.
Yeah. So what actually sparked your interest into this whole world of the paranormal and supernatural?
Well, now we're gonna date myself, but I started watching the creature features back in the 70s. So I was a youngster back then. But the Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula, I was always into that. And then even in the 70s, when it was summertime, they're all playing softball outside. I was down in the basement watching King Kong versus Godzilla. I was always into the strange and unusual. And it wasn't until the late 70s to where me and my family on a Friday night, I remember this perfectly, like it was yesterday, all saw this weird spinning lights in the sky, and it was right over our place in Lindenhurst, Illinois. And it made no sound. It didn't seem like it was that far off the ground, and the lights would spin, then they would go off, and immediately they'd be across the lake, probably a quarter of a mile away, that in a split second. So at that point, my grandfather, he was in the early chapters of MUFON in Chicago, and that really gave us a bonding, 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid, his grandson and granddad, and we'd talk about aliens and UFOs and everything he's experienced. And that's what really kind of got me going down this path. As far as hunting the truth, I think that has always been, you had Ghostbusters in the 80s, right? Everybody wanted to be a Ghostbuster and catch a ghost. I wasn't really into that, but I think when the paranormal shows really started coming out in the early 2000s,
Yeah.
It was later 90s, early 2000s. That's when I was like, it's on TV. And I do believe it's real, but do I believe what they're telling me is real? So that's really where I started getting that whole, I need to find out for myself. I want to hunt the truth. I want to either find it or debunk it. You know, I'm not going to be a skeptic. I'm not going to be a hardcore believer. I want to know what the truth is. And that's it. So that's what started me down there. That's the long answer. So I kind of know my life now of getting into the weird.
What do you think at the moment people are doing right in the field, and what do you think they're doing wrong in the field? Other investigators out there.
I'm going to say anybody who's out investigating is doing the right thing. It really doesn't matter what the technique is. You know, we were talking about the leapfrog technique. There's so many different things that you could.
Oh yeah, tell us a little bit about that, and then get back to other things. Tell us what the leapfrog technique
all right,
is.
Leapfrog. Well, a lot of people say, "What are your what are your techniques out there? Like, what do you do?" And I say, you know what? I use the human technique. I go out and I pretend I'm a human. And they're like, "What is that?" Well, it's laughing, it's talking, it's being human. That's the number one. Number two is, you know, if you're going out with 2 or 3 people, I really don't like to go more than 4, because then you just, you know, it just becomes everyone's talking and you kind of lose sense of your observation. So then I thought, let's do what we call leapfrog. Let's say there's 3 of us. I'll send one person. We all have walkies. Everybody's safe, right? I send them up 100 yards. The next person only goes 50 yards. We're all in radio contact, but we're all also isolated. So it's kind of a safe isolation into the woods, if you will. And then what we want to do is kind of hone in, you know, without anybody around you, to be able to hone in on, could you have some type of encounter, whether it's lights, Bigfoot, who knows, right? And basically that's what we try to do. And we'll do this like in 5-minute segments. And then that last person will go and pass the person in the middle, get to the first person, and then we just kind of leapfrog that way throughout. We'll do that for a little bit. Some people get a little bit freaked out when they're left alone, and I'll always go, you know, nothing's written in stone. If it doesn't feel right that night, we don't do it. And if we do, I feel that's my way. I mean, believe me, if you listen to my body cam and my audio when I'm alone out in the woods, talking to the woods, well, like I said, you'll hear the raccoon and possum laugh, but after they're done laughing, I'm wondering, I really am talking to something or someone. And that's what I feel. You know, I'm not an empath, a psychic, or anything like that. It's just, it's hard to explain, right? We all have these feelings. So that's what I like to do, is the the human technique and the leapfrog technique more than anything. While we were talking about the other people getting out, they're at least getting out. That's how come I say I'll never knock somebody for banging on trees, to get wood knock response, or to give that howl. Those are all great techniques. It's just something that I don't do, because I don't know what the wood knocks would mean from these Bigfoot people. I don't even know what the howl would mean. I mean, one could be boom, boom, dinner time, boom, So I'm kind of like, a lot of people throw rocks in the woods. In my first documentary you saw, I was with Linda Godfrey, actually, and we were out in the Kettle, and she tried to shake this little sapling. She's a little older, a little smaller. She could shake it pretty much. And she goes, "Why don't you try it?" This wasn't recorded. And I take this thing and I start whipping it back and forth. And I put my head down. I sound like a silverback gorilla, and I'm grunting and roaring and being super aggressive. And I remember my hat was on because I didn't want like this little sapling branches to fall on me. And all of a sudden I'm done. And I have this pain on the left side of my head. And I see this pine cone right by my feet. And I'm thinking, wow, that pine cone hit me. It came from this oak. It didn't make sense, right? So I actually picked that thing up, and it weighed nothing because it was like last year's pine cone. It was no weight to it. But my head hurt for after one pain on one side. And I actually had a lump on the side of my head right here. And is it for me? Could it have been a little rock? Now we couldn't find the rock because it was a high forest or anything, but I realized at that point, I believe, that I didn't want to become aggressive. And I think that's what the howls, the knocks maybe could be. I'm not sure. But that's why I stopped doing it. I don't throw rocks in the woods anymore, by the way, because they also threw them at my feet the week later, and I was done. I was ready to start investigating with a hard hat that you see what the road crew has, or a goalie's mask. And, I don't think that would have been too fun to be out in the woods enjoying it. And I'm all like, like an umpire or something like that. So, yeah. But I think the bottom line, real quick, everybody's doing the right thing, whether they're apers, whether they're the woo, the paranormal people, whatever they are, everybody's out there. So I always say kudos to everybody who's doing it, because everybody else is just sitting back and watching podcasts or documentaries and making their own conclusion. But it's good.
We do have a question too from MJCF, not sure Sutton, but have you ever had strange phenomena follow you home or experience anything within your home afterwards?
From being out in the woods, and I'll make this one quick, but I've had two very weird dreams of Bigfoot here, right on my street. And these are, how some dreams you dream like you have like 3 arms and 2 heads and everything's just all, like weird. This dream that I had was so intensely real. And I was called to come out of my garage, and I remember it was late, and I'm walking down my street, and there's a street light right there. And it was Bigfoot talking to me in his, I don't know, telepathy, saying, "I'm right here. I would like to meet you." And so I'm walking up, and he looks shorter than I would expect, but that's because the street went down a little bit, and he was kind of bent over a little bit down on the slope. Then he stood up, and he was a giant, and he just looked at me and just kind of ran off, and I could hear it. And it was so vivid. There was been a couple dreams like that, and I would talk to people, and they would say, those people that would say, "Oh, well, Bigfoot will come into your dreams too." Well, now where are we going with this? They can turn into energy. Yeah. They can get into your dreams. I mean, where does the insanity end? However, I don't discount that. So the long answer would be, maybe something did follow me home, and maybe it was not physical, but maybe it was more, mental telepathy or something. Yeah. So I don't know, but again, some people would say, "Well, Jay, you're looking for it so bad, you want it so bad that you're going to dream about this."
Yeah, you're manifesting it.
You're manifesting it, exactly. That's even possible too. So I really don't know, but that would be my answer for bringing anything home.
That's interesting, because I know that Jenn, who is somebody who's a sensitive and is psychic, you are very much, I've never actually said this to Jenn before, but she's very much part of that type of older indigenous tradition, which doesn't distinguish between dreams and reality when it comes to psychic or paranormal experiences. Like, Jenn, you will tell a story about an experience you've had, but it was a dream experience. And to you, it's as real as a psychic experience in the real world.
Well, yeah, you kind of take them as visions in a way. I'm a very visual person, so I think if other people are really visual, then I think that they also probably have those abilities as well. So you never know.
That's what I'm saying, but it's your truth. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Is everybody has that part of it, and that's how I feel that could very well be. I don't have any explanation for it. I just rattle off what I could experience and just chalk that up as it was a really cool dream. Let me tell you, most times, I was gonna say most times it'd be a different type of dream, but this was a good dream for me.
Back quickly to when you are out in the woods at night and doing the type of investigations which both of your documentaries show so well. In the second film, in Beyond the Kettle, Finding J2, there are 2 different scenarios, which both make me, to be honest, concerned for you. One is the leapfrog technique that you were talking about, which everybody should watch the film so they can see it, because it's fascinating. That's when Adam Benedict, who's at the end of the leapfrog line, has that very weird encounter. And the other one is when you're with, is it Mary Marshall?
Mm-hmm.
And you guys feel there's something just terribly menacing and dreadful there. And both of those things made me think of David Paulides' Missing 411.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you ever find are you ever concerned taking that type of Paulides research into account and other stories throughout history where people are just disappear off the map?
Yeah,
are
I mean,
you ever thinking maybe something will snatch one of us?
well, here's the way I look at it this way is I believe that is real. I don't believe that all the missing people are Sasquatch related. I mean, I don't know, but when I go out there, it is always about safety, no matter what we do. And it has to be with the group of people I'm out with, because I won't hike alone. And it's not that I'm afraid to hike alone, but my wife said if I ever died in the woods, she'd kill me. So I've got to, make sure that I, stay very much alive. But at the same time, you got to know your surroundings. You got to know these trails. You got to know everything about the safety part of it to be able to go out and be comfortable with these woods. Like, I feel like I have a relationship with these woods, not so much Bigfoot, but with the woods. I just know them, and it's a great relationship. And, doing this for almost 9 years, and I still have my head attached to me, I feel pretty confident the next time I go out, that same thing's going to happen. So I think it's more of a positive push that I put out there. Again, now if you pluck me out and throw me up in Eagle River or throw me up in Michigan or anything like that, and I don't know those areas, yeah, I'd be a little apprehensive, to go out there. I'd need to study a little bit, maybe take baby steps going out there and just kind of, do that, because people ask me all the time, do you go everywhere in Wisconsin to look? And I'm like, no, I've got this little nook, and it'll probably take a lifetime or two to actually, to investigate the thorough, to be able to find the truth. And even then you might not be able to find it, but why would I want to jump around just to say, yeah, there's something strange in the woods? I've got something comfortable right here and safe. So yeah, I definitely take everything I do. I leave my phone tracking on. Whenever I get to an area, I always suggest somebody text those coordinates to somebody else who's not out there that knows where you're at. So whenever I get where I'm going, I'll text my wife what area I'm at, what time I arrived, and when I leave. Because if I do go missing, there's going to be the time and the distance of where a good search party could start looking if anything was to happen to me. So, yeah. I just try to play it safe with everything I do.
Oh, I think, Dean, your audio.
Mike in MB, asks, Jay, have you tried using a dog whistle when you investigate? I don't recommend it from experience.
I've actually never tried that, and I will listen to you to not try that then. There's a lot of there's a lot of different things I'll do out there. I mean, my youngest daughter has one of those banging sparkly toys that when you hit flashes almost like a police car. I've been out there just hitting it in the dark and just waving it around, and I try all sorts of things just to bring the human technique. I'm being strange and unusual out there. Hopefully something that I want to make contact with will come closer. And again, with the whole Finding Jay, I don't think we'll ever find Bigfoot, but I think Bigfoot will find us. So not only is it just Finding Jay, it could be Finding Jenn, it could be Finding Dean. We could make so many of these movies. It would be great, being out there. So so it's all the different techniques. And, as long as I heard about the dog whistle, though, I'm going to steer clear from it. I'd love to hear about what happened, though. I am curious.
I think on that, everybody can go out and be found perhaps by something is a perfect ending to the show. But can you let our viewers and listeners, and also I'd like to say it's been a great joy to talk to you, but can you let them know how they can watch Finding Jay and how they can watch Beyond the Kettle, Finding Jay 2, and how they can keep up with everything else you're doing?
Yeah, actually, if you just follow my website or bookmark my website, it's jaybachochin.com. There, I keep that thing updated just as much as social media. So everybody thinks you need to go to a Facebook page or an Instagram page or whatever. If you go to my website and you go to news and events or what's going on, I'll keep that updated. And where you can find my film, Beyond the Kettle, Finding J2, it's only streaming on Vimeo right now. And there is a link on my website that'll take you right there, so you don't have to go to Vimeo and search for it. So you can go right to my website and look under media. You'll see like news, because this is a documentary that just came out last week. Finding Jay, my first documentary, is on Amazon Prime, and it's also on Vimeo as well. So you can find both films on Vimeo and just the first Finding Jay on Amazon. However, I am still working with Amazon Prime to get Beyond the Kettle up there. I think I might be getting closer. Quote me on it. I cross fingers. I mean, I'm working with a lot of red tape and everything with that, because they just got, they really started to not let a lot of these indie documentaries up since February 2021. And I've been hearing that throughout the film, people that making documentaries saying it's almost impossible to get your film on there now. But, so again, I'm crossing my fingers on that. But right now, and I am trying to look at other platforms, but for right now, you can find it on Vimeo, both films. And Blu-rays should be available for Beyond the Kettle by the end of the month, but I guess it is the end of the month, probably the first week of September. And again, those details will also be on my website on how to purchase them.
Well, that's fantastic. And thank you for being our very first guest on Talking Weird since we've moved to Untold Radio Network. You were a wonderful first man off the bat. And thank you to everybody out there who watched us and listened to us tonight. And Jay, until we hopefully talk again, keep us posted on the fairy documentary on Finding J3. I cannot wait to see that. But until we chat then, keep it weird.
Keep it weird. Thanks. You guys have a great night.
You too.
Bye.